My name is Charlie Allen. I'm 17 years old, though most days I feel like I've lived 3 lifetimes in this skin. It was July 14th, 2024, in Savannah, Georgia. If you've ever been there in the summer, you know the air doesn't just sit. It presses against you like a wet wool blanket. I was working a summer shift at a local landscaping company, mostly just hauling bags of mulch and trying to stay hydrated. My boss, a guy named Miller who didn't believe in breaks, had me clearing a drainage ditch behind a new housing development. I remember the smell of stagnant water and the sound of a distant lawnmower. It was 2:42 p.m. when the world started to tilt. It wasn't a sudden flash. It was a slow, sickening slide. My heart wasn't just beating, it was slamming against my ribs like a trapped bird. I reached for my water jug, but my fingers felt like they belonged to someone else, numb and clumsy. I tried to call out to Miller, but my throat was a desert. Then came the heat. Not the Georgia sun, but a searing, internal fire that started in my chest and radiated out to my fingertips. I remember looking down at my hands and seeing them shake violently before the ground rose up to meet me. The impact of my face hitting the dirt didn't even hurt. That was the scariest part. I just felt the grit of the soil against my cheek and watched a small green beetle crawl past my eye. I wanted to move, but my nervous system had unplugged. My vision began to tunnel, the vibrant green of the grass turning into a muddy, flickering gray. I could hear Miller shouting my name from somewhere far away, his voice sounding like it was underwater. Elias. Hey kid, get up. I heard the frantic crunch of boots on gravel. I wanted to tell him I was trying, but I was already slipping through the floor of the world. The last thing I felt was the vibration of his footsteps through the earth, and then the silence took over. It wasn't the silence of a quiet room, it was the silence of a vacuum. The transition wasn't a tunnel of light, it was a harsh, clinical awakening into a nightmare. I wasn't in the ditch anymore. I was hovering near the ceiling of Trauma Room 3 at Memorial Health. I knew it was Room 3 because the clock on the wall was cracked at the bottom. Below me, a team of 6 people was filtered through a chaotic, rhythmic desperation. I saw myself, or rather, the shell I used to inhabit. My skin was a terrifying shade of translucent blue-gray. My mouth hung open, and my eyes were rolled back into my head. I heard the lead doctor, a woman with a sharp ponytail and a smudge of ink on her white coat, yell, "V-fib, charge to 200. I watched the nurse lean over me, his face glistening with sweat, performing chest compressions. Every time he pushed down, I heard the sickening crack of my own ribs. It didn't hurt me up where I was, but the sound was visceral, a dry, snapping noise like kindling. I felt a strange sense of detachment, a cold curiosity. I saw the monitor, a flat, relentless green line that hummed a single, terrifying note. "Clear," the doctor shouted. My body jolted on the table, my legs kicking out slightly from the electrical surge. Nothing. The flat line continued its steady, mocking tone. I looked at the clock. 2:56 p.m. They had been working on me for 14 minutes. I saw Miller standing in the hallway through the glass door, his hands over his face, sobbing into his dusty work shirt. He looked so small. I tried to reach out, to tell him it was okay, but I had no hands to reach with. The room started to grow cold, not a physical chill, but an emotional frost. The urgency of the doctors began to fade into a somber, practiced routine. They were losing the fight, and I was watching my life end from the perspective of a fly on the wall. The doctor looked at the nurse and shook her head slightly, her shoulders slumping. That's when the walls of the hospital began to dissolve, melting away like wet paper. The hospital didn't disappear, it just stopped being the most real thing in the room. I found myself standing, actually standing, on what felt like a solid floor, but when I looked down, there was nothing but a vast, shimmering expanse that looked like the surface of a dark lake at midnight. I wasn't in the ceiling anymore. I was in a place that felt more heavy than earth, like the gravity of reality was turned up to 10. And he was there. He wasn't glowing with a blinding radiance that obscured his features. He was just there. He wore a simple, dark tunic that looked worn, like he'd been walking for a long time. His hair was dark and coarse, and his skin was the color of the Georgia clay I'd been digging in, but weathered by a sun I didn't recognize. He didn't look like a painting. He looked like a man who knew exactly how much a human soul weighed. He didn't say anything at first. He just looked at me with an expression that combined devastating grief with an immovable peace. We weren't in a garden or a palace. We were standing in front of a series of windows that seemed to tear through the fabric of the dark space. In one, I saw a grocery store, the Publix down the street from my house. People were moving through the aisles, but they weren't looking at each other. Their eyes were fixed on their phones, their faces tight with a kind of low-grade panic I'd never noticed before. In another window, I saw a bank lobby where an old man was being told his account was frozen, his hands shaking as he clutched a paper slip. The atmosphere in these visions was thick with a specific kind of tension, not a war, but a fracturing, a breakdown of trust. I felt the weight of it in my own chest. Jesus turned to me then, and his voice wasn't a boom of thunder. It was a quiet, resonant frequency that vibrated in my marrow. He pointed to a window that showed a calendar flipping rapidly, stopping abruptly on a year that pulsed with a dull, warning heat, 2026. Jesus didn't move his lips like a person giving a speech. The words arrived inside my head, heavy and rounded, like smooth stones dropped into a deep well. "You see the agitation, Charlie," he said. He wasn't looking at the 2026 calendar anymore. He was looking at a vision of a suburban street, my street. It looked normal, but the colors were wrong. The sky was a bruised purple, and the air between the houses looked thick, like invisible static was humming through the power lines. "The year 2026 is not an end," he whispered. "It is a pivot, a great thinning." I watched a neighbor I recognized, Mr. Henderson, standing in his driveway. He was holding a physical letter, his face pale and drawn. He looked at his front door, then at his car, then back at the letter. He looked paralyzed. Jesus stepped closer to the vision, and I felt a wave of his grief wash over me. It felt like a physical weight on my shoulders. "The systems built by human hands to provide security will begin to groan under their own weight," he explained. "By 2026, the digital walls and the paper promises will no longer hold the tension. People will find themselves standing in their own yards, realizing that the things they trusted to keep them safe, the banks, the apps, the invisible networks, have become their primary sources of fear." It wasn't a lightning bolt from the sky. It was a collapse of the middle. I saw images of crowded transit stations where the screens were all dark and people weren't yelling. They were whispering in small, terrified groups. The warning wasn't about a fire, it was about a frost, a cooling of human connection. "In 2026, Jesus said, his hand reaching out toward the shimmering air, the ability to buy, to sell, and to trust a stranger's word will be restricted by a new kind of social gate. It will happen so quietly that most will walk right into the cage before they hear the lock click." He looked at me then, his eyes dark and piercing. "You are being shown this because you will be among those who see the lock before it closes." The vision shifted, and suddenly I wasn't an observer anymore. I was standing in a memory that hadn't happened yet, but it felt more real than the hospital room. I was in my kitchen back in Savannah. My mom was there, her back to me, scrubbing a pot in the sink. The radio was playing in the background, a news report about regional access protocols and compliance tiering. The date on the digital microwave read, March 12th, 2026. "Mom," I said. She didn't turn around. Her shoulders were hiked up to her ears. I walked over and touched her arm, but my hand felt like it was passing through cold mist. I saw her phone on the counter. A notification popped up in bright, aggressive red, "Access denied. Subscription tier insufficient for essential utilities." She started to cry, a silent, shaking sob that broke my heart. Then, the front door opened. My older brother, Caleb, walked in. He looked different, sharper, colder. He was wearing a gray uniform I didn't recognize with a small, circular patch on the shoulder. "You have to sign the digital oath, Mom," Caleb said, his voice flat and robotic. "The grace period is over. If you don't, I can't keep the power on here. My supervisor already flagged this address." "It's a lie, Caleb," she whispered, finally turning. "It's a way to track every thought we have. It's the only way to eat," he snapped back. The tension between them was a physical blade. I watched as my family, the people who were my entire world, fractured right in front of me. This wasn't a movie. This was a Tuesday. Caleb reached for his tablet, his thumb hovering over a report noncompliance button. The betrayal in the room was so thick I could taste it, like copper in my mouth. Jesus stood beside me in the kitchen, his presence a somber shadow. "This is the personal cost," he said. "The line won't be drawn in the sand of a battlefield, Elias." It will be drawn through the center of your dinner table. The kitchen dissolved into a dark, sterile space that felt like the inside of a massive computer or a vault. Floating in the air were thousands of glowing ledgers, lines of data, names, and numbers. I saw my own name, Elias Thorne. Beneath it was a list of every choice I'd ever made, but they weren't categorized by good or bad. They were categorized by dependence. In 2026, Jesus said, walking among the glowing lines of data, the world will demand a total accounting. Every transaction, every movement, every word spoken in private will be weighed against the common good. But the common good will be defined by those who do not know my name. He pointed to a section of my ledger that was flashing amber. It represented my future, my college plans, my hope for a career in forestry, my desire to marry my girlfriend, Sarah. To keep these things, he warned, you will be asked to trade the one thing that cannot be replaced, your internal compass. By mid-2026, the pressure to conform to the universal identity standard will become a crushing weight on the young. You will be told that to stay connected is to stay safe. But I tell you, to stay connected to their system is to disconnect from the spirit. I felt a wave of nausea. I saw a vision of myself sitting in a small, cramped apartment, staring at a screen that was asking me to verify allegiance to the Global Stability Act in order to unlock my bank account to pay for my medicine. My inhaler was sitting on the desk, empty. The choice was binary: give up my soul's autonomy or lose my breath. The warning was no longer a distant prophecy. It was a direct, terrifying confrontation with my own survival instinct. Jesus looked at me, his expression unwavering. The outcome of 2026 is not decided by kings, Elias. It is decided by what you are willing to lose. The vision shifted again, and we weren't in my kitchen anymore. We were standing in the middle of a major city. It looked like Atlanta, but the energy was unrecognizable. It was noon, yet the streets were eerily quiet. There were no sirens, no shouting, just the hum of electric transit vehicles gliding past. People walked with their heads down, their movements synchronized and efficient. I saw a woman drop her bag of groceries. The oranges rolled across the sidewalk, but no one stopped to help her. They actually stepped over the fruit, their eyes fixed forward as if acknowledging her struggle would trigger a penalty. The fear in 2026 will not be of a great war, Jesus said, his voice cutting through the sterile hum of the city. It will be a fear of being unseen by the system. If you are not in the digital ledger, you do not exist. And if you do not exist, you cannot eat. He walked over to a digital kiosk that stood on the corner. It was sleek, glowing with a soft blue light. As a young man approached it, the kiosk scanned his face. A green circle appeared, and he was allowed to board the bus. But then a girl, maybe 19, stepped up. The scanner turned a deep, vibrating crimson. The girl froze. She didn't scream. She just backed away, her face draining of color. I saw the people around her instinctively create a 10-foot bubble of space, as if she were contagious. In 2026, Jesus continued, this social score becomes the only currency that matters. It will be tied to your health records, your carbon footprint, and your public loyalty. This girl spoke a truth on a private forum 3 days ago that the Stability Act deemed harmful. Now, she cannot ride the bus. Tomorrow, she will not be able to enter the grocery store. I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. This wasn't a futuristic movie. The clothes they wore, the phones they held, they were the same ones I saw in the mall last week. The transition was already under my feet. The scene dissolved into a massive, sprawling warehouse. It looked like a distribution center for a major online retailer, but instead of packages, it was filled with people. They were sitting on folding chairs in long, neat rows. These were the unverified. I saw families huddled together, their belongings in trash bags. There was no violence, just a heavy, suffocating atmosphere of exhaustion. They were waiting for re-education processing. This is the partition, Jesus explained, walking between the rows of weary souls. By the autumn of 2026, the world will be divided into the synchronized and the outcasts. There will be no middle ground left for the lukewarm. The church, Elias, the buildings you know. Many will be empty or converted into community wellness centers that preach the gospel of the state. He stopped in front of a man who looked exactly like my Uncle Pete. The man was staring at a digital contract on a tablet, his finger trembling. If he signed, he could go home. If he didn't, he stayed here in the gray light. The outcome of 2026 is determined by the individual's threshold for discomfort, Jesus said, his eyes locking onto mine with an intensity that made me want to look away. The world will offer a piece of convenience in exchange for your peace of spirit. Most will choose the convenience because they have forgotten how to suffer for the truth. They will say, it's just a digital signature, or it's just a health update. But every small concession is a brick in the wall that shuts me out. I looked at the man who looked like my uncle. He closed his eyes, a single tear tracking through the dust on his face, and pressed his thumb to the screen. The light on the tablet turned green. He stood up, but his eyes were vacant, like the pilot had left the cockpit. Everything vanished. The warehouse, the city, the crying woman, all gone. I was back in the dark expanse with Jesus. The only thing visible was a single, flickering candle sitting on a small wooden table between us. The flame was tiny, but it cast a shadow of Jesus that seemed to stretch into infinity. He looked at me, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of what I can only describe as a final invitation. Elias, he said, and the way he said my name made me feel like he was stitching my soul back together. You are returning to a world that is already tilting toward this year. You will wake up in that hospital bed, and you will see the beginning of the cracks. You will see the news reports, the new apps, the mandatory updates. You will feel the social pressure to join the harmony. The warning I give you is this: 2026 is the year of the great sifting. What you decide to value today will be what saves or loses you then. He leaned over the candle. If you choose to live for the system, you will have a full stomach and a hollow heart. If you choose to live for the truth, you will be hunted, you will be hungry, and you will be free. There is no third path. I felt a sudden, sharp pain in my chest, the first physical sensation since I collapsed in the ditch. It felt like a hot needle. I looked down and saw my chest beginning to glow with the same clinical blue light from the hospital. One event will happen within a week of your return, Jesus whispered, his voice fading as the darkness began to swirl. A small thing, a letter from your bank regarding behavioral banking. When you see it, remember this: the countdown has already begun. Do not be afraid of the hunger. Be afraid of the harvest. The silence of the void didn't fade, it shattered. It felt like being dragged behind a speeding car, my soul scraping against the jagged edges of reality. The transition wasn't a peaceful drift back into my skin. It was a collision. 1 second, I was looking into eyes that held the history of the universe. The next, I was choking on a plastic tube. The smell of ozone and antiseptic hit me like a physical blow. My chest felt like it had been crushed by a hydraulic press, and every nerve ending was screaming in a language of pure fire. We have a rhythm. He's back. The voice was high-pitched, frantic. I opened my eyes, but all I could see were the blinding fluorescent tiles of the ceiling. The light was aggressive, hostile. I tried to lift my hand to pull the tube out of my throat, but my arms felt like lead weights bolted to the bed. I heard the rhythmic hiss-click of a ventilator and the frantic chirping of a heart monitor that was no longer flatlining. It was erratic, jumping between 120 and 140 beats per minute, reflecting the sheer terror of being trapped in a broken body again. The doctor with the ponytail, the one I'd seen from the ceiling, leaned over me. Her face was drenched in sweat, her mask hanging off one ear. Elias, stay with me. You're at Memorial. You had a cardiac arrest caused by a rare heat-induced arrhythmia. You've been gone for nearly 20 minutes. I wanted to tell her I hadn't been gone. I wanted to tell her that the hospital room was the dream and what I'd just seen was the only thing that was real. But all I could do was squeeze my eyes shut as a single, hot tear rolled into my ear. The weight of 2026 was already sitting on my chest, heavier than the physical trauma of the paddles. I looked at the digital clock on the wall. July 14th, 2024, 3:22 p.m. The countdown I had been warned about had officially begun. Recovery was a slow, agonizing blur of physical therapy and hushed conversations in hallways. They called it a miracle, but I called it a burden. My parents were there every day, crying and thanking God, but I couldn't look at my brother, Caleb, without seeing him in that gray uniform from the vision. Every time he reached for his phone, I flinched, expecting to see a report button on his screen. I was discharged 6 days later. My dad drove me home through the streets of Savannah, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't looking at the moss-draped oaks or the historic squares. I was looking at the cameras. I noticed them everywhere, New, sleek black spheres mounted on every traffic light and storefront. I saw the smart city banners hanging from the lamp posts, promising seamless security for a changing world. My heart hammered against my healing ribs. It was starting. That evening, I sat at the kitchen table, the same one from the vision. My mom was cooking pasta, the steam rising just like it had in the future. The comfort of home felt like a thin veneer over a dark abyss. Then, the mail came. My dad tossed a stack of envelopes onto the counter. The bank sent another one of those update notices, he muttered, opening a beer. Something about a value-based banking pilot program starting next month. Says if we don't opt in, our interest rates triple. He tossed the letter aside like it was junk mail. I felt the blood drain from my face. I reached out and picked up the paper with trembling fingers. At the top was the logo of our local credit union, but underneath, in small, precise print, it read, "Member participation in social stability metrics required for Tier 1 access." I looked at the date at the bottom of the letter. It wasn't 2026 yet, but the foundation was being poured. I looked at my dad, who was laughing at something on the TV, and I realized he was already walking into the cage. It happened 3 days after I got home. I was supposed to be resting, but the restlessness in my spirit was a fever. I walked down to the corner store, a small, family-owned bodega where I'd bought sodas since I was 5. Mr. Garcia, the owner, was behind the counter, but he wasn't smiling. He was staring at a new, blue-lit tablet that had been installed next to his old cash register. It looked exactly like the kiosks I'd seen in the Silent City. "Hey, Mr. Garcia," I said, my voice cracking. I grabbed a Gatorade and set it on the counter. He didn't look up. He pointed at the tablet. "Gotta scan your ID, Elias. New city ordinance. Verifiable consumer tracking. They say it's to prevent inventory leakage, but I think it's just a way to see who's buying what." I pulled out my driver's license, my hands shaking. As I tapped it against the screen, the device let out a soft, digital chirp. A green light flashed, but then a second screen popped up that only I could see from my angle. It was a list of my recent medical history, the cardiac event at Memorial. Next to the entry, there was a small, flashing icon, a yellow triangle. Underneath, a line of text read, "Health risk assessment, high. Insurance premium adjustment pending. Restrict access to high-sodium/high sugar products." Mr. Garcia looked at me, his eyes full of a confused, helpless apology. "The system, it's not letting the sale go through for the Gatorade, kid. It says it's for your protection." I stood there, the cold bottle in my hand, realizing that the autonomy of my own life had just been revoked over a $3 drink. This was the proof. It wasn't an apocalypse of fire. It was an apocalypse of permissions. I looked out the window at the bright Georgia sun and the people walking by, oblivious to the invisible grid tightening around them. The warning was real. 2026 wasn't coming. It was already here, hiding in the software of our lives. I walked out of the store without the drink, leaving Mr. Garcia staring at the glowing blue screen, while the silence of the city began to hum in my ears. If this message felt important, it probably was. There are more stories like this, and they only get deeper. Subscribe now so you don't miss the next one, because some warnings aren't meant to be ignored.